Hey guys, Woods Farm here, just back out working on the Kubelwagen. I believe this is part 58. So I know a few videos ago I said we were going to be around part 60. It's going to be close. Still a lot of work to do to be finished, but we're getting there. I got to work on the driver's side doors today and do some odds and ends. I'm going to get this latch sorted out on this door, and I also need to weld on the piece that makes the door jamb. Work on that. Maybe start working on the framework on the other side for those two doors. I'm waiting for an order from metal supermarkets, some 1-inch angle and some 1-inch flat stock and some other odds and ends that I need to work on the door pillar, the center door pillar on the other side. So hopefully by this weekend I'll have that material and I can work on that. I know I was on the fence, but I ended up putting some body fill along the seam here. So that's got to get sanded down. I think I'm going to push the car out into the driveway just to keep the dust down, but it's the same thing. I put some body fill around these tow hooks just to kind of make it look a little cleaner. So some sanding's got to happen. The machine shop guy down the road, he's got the pins ready for attaching the windshield. There's a pin that the windshield pivots on, and it also is what the rear view mirror attaches to, so those are ready. I played around with some measurements and some designs for the windshield frame, and ultimately what I decided I'm going to do is I'm going to order the rubber gasket from a 181 thing windshield and modify that to work in this windshield. This windshield is a slightly different shape, but it's roughly the same dimensions, probably a little bit smaller. So I should be able to take that gasket and cut it down and make it work. The problem is I don't want to start welding up a frame until I have the gasket and I know exactly how that gasket works and fits inside the framework. Now I've got the upper portion of the old windshield, and I can sort of speculate how it works and what I need, but I really don't want to waste materials and time until I get that gasket. So you can order those from different sources in the States. So I'm going to do that before the windshield happens. And at this point, I might actually be able to reuse these side pieces. We're going to see. They're not that rusty. The top is completely trashed, and the bottom obviously is just gone. It was that bad. Just crumbled into pieces when I way back when I stripped down the 181 thing. Those lower supports for the 181 thing, they're pretty rare these days, and they command a really crazy price on the market right now. I think because that lower part, it gets the moisture buildup, and obviously it's the first thing that's going to rust out, right? Paint, still been an issue to source paint. I've decided on, there's a supplier of World War II reenactment stuff, and they've got some lacquer paint that's for vehicles and equipment, and you can get it in the right color. I'm just going to order it from them. Actually, I kind of calculated it, and I think I only need 4 pints. So it's going to be like maybe $150, which isn't that bad. Maybe a little more when you add in some primer. But that's in the works right now. I got to order that, but it's going to happen soon. In fact, I think the vehicle, once the doors are done, I'm going to prep it for paint. Because the windshield, it can get fabricated and painted separately and added later. So I think the windshield is going to be one of the last things that gets done. I still have to play around with some sort of, I have to figure out what I'm going to do to make this back seat look a little bit better. But at the very least, I need to come up with some sort of a bracket that's going to be attached to the inside of the rocker panel on both sides, and that will support the lower part of the seat, the lower bench. That's got to be designed, fabricated, installed before I paint. The plywood, I might just go with that. I'm going to paint it obviously to match, but for now I'm not going to really worry about the back seat. I do have to order some seat belts for the front. It's going to need that for the safety. So front seats and seat belts, obviously. These front seats, there is, I talked about this before, but they need to get painted. There is a vinyl fabric paint that is very close to the shade of paint that I'm going to be using, and I think it'll just blend in a lot better if I do that. Maybe I'm going to go black, but it'll be either black or a beigey green color. So I found the simplest way to do the door jamb is to actually clamp it to the door and then move the door into position, and that gives you a nice kind of straight surface. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start working on the door skins. This is 20 gauge. So I've just got the door frames off the hinges and on the bench here so I can trace them out. Okay, that's the easy part. Now I have to transfer those ribs, the position of those ribs, onto these door panels, which won't be too difficult. But then I have to roll them in the bead roller and be as precise as possible to try to get this to line up. Right, the idea is, you see that line there, it needs to carry across and hit this one. I think what's going to be critical is the top line and the bottom, the second one down. They're gonna, I think they'll pop the most, and your eye is going to carry along these lines and right through, and then to that line there. The lower one, there's no real reference point for the lower one, so it can be a little higher, lower maybe, and the middle, I guess the next one up from the bottom, to a lesser extent. But the top two are, they're going to have to be bang on. And previously when I did these panels, it was a learning curve, both getting them straight. You can see this one of the small mistakes was that line there. It's a little bit of a curve to it. And then I realized, you know, setting it up in the bead roller is, you know, you're off, you can be off 1/8 of an inch or so, and that'll throw off this whole line. So, you know, I'm going to give it my best shot, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, there's the layout. Like I said, I focused on those center two lines, and I've got everything lined up and level to the best of my ability. So then the next trick is actually rolling those beads in. I'm going to need help for that, so I got to wait. So I'm going to move along and start working on the other side. I need to make the two frames for the doors. Okay, so I got the beads rolled on the door skins. So now I'm going to weld them down onto the frame. Okay, so I'm just starting to weld this down with plug welds. Again, it's kind of tricky, sort of like the rear quarter panel. Got to use a lot of clamps. This is the first one, so I'm kind of playing around with the technique, but essentially starting at one end and moving slowly across on both sides, because what happens is there's kind of a, when you roll the beads into it, it distorts the panel just a bit. And if you're not careful, you're going to end up with a kink at a certain point if you kind of jump around when it comes to putting in the plug welds. You have to slowly start at the one end and kind of just creep your way across, clamping and moving the clamps, welding, moving the clamps as you go. So here's the last kind of little bit that I'm going to have to deal with trying to flatten out. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, how when you put the beads when you roll the beads, the ribs, it tends to make the plate have a curve this way. I think that's because the rollers are round and it transfers some of that into the sheet. So there are ways to counteract this. I did some research online, and you can pre-stretch the material and do other things, but you need other sheet metal tools to do that. So if you were to have to do this on plates, on sheets of a larger scale, you might have to do that, but so far I've been able to clamp things down to get the sheets to flatten out. So essentially what I did on the last door, and it seemed to work, is I just start at one end and work my way over. Obviously the first, third of it's pretty easy, but then as I come down this way, I need more and more clamps, and I have to be more careful about making sure everything's lined up before I go and plug weld it. Oh, that's not good. There's a good example of how you move down. It's getting particularly difficult now that I'm right at the corner. So it takes 2 or 3 clamps to kind of progressively move it down and smooth it out. And then I just go back and weld, and then I can move these clamps. So almost done. Okay, that's what the finished doors look like. So all I have to do now is the driver's side. Pretty happy with the ribs and the way they lined up. I mean, they're not perfect, but for my purposes, they'll do just fine. Okay, I'm just getting a chance to work at these passenger side doors. Right now I'm working on the center pillar, which is taking a little bit of extra time because I have to make sure that it is lined up and positioned correctly. It'd be very difficult to grind the welds out to kind of move it, so I want to make sure it's right. So I'm just triple checking everything and trying to get it, as level and plumb and in line with the sides of the car as possible, and I'm also trying to match it up dimensionally with the ones on the other side. So I'm just about to go ahead and weld it down right now. Okay, that's it. Just finished the driver's side doors, so that's the last of the body work. Going to be looking at working on the windshield next, and I've got some small detail work like the bumper bars. I need to make mounting points for the convertible canopy framework, little things like that, mounting the headlights, making brackets, mounts for the tail lights, little things like that. Still need to get done. I'm also going to start sanding and prepping for paint. So there's a little bit of rust spots here or there and some rough points that need to get sanded out before I paint. If you have any questions, comments, definitely leave them below. I'll wrap this video up here, and Thanks for watching.